Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World episode 193. I'm your host John Jordan. Don't forget to check out my daily email about blockchain gaming. You can find that at gamestx.substack.com. In today's episode, I'm talking to Herman Narula, who is the CEO at Improbable. Improbable, pretty well known in the game tech space, raised a ton of money about 10 years ago and has been working on some very hard problems. It's interesting now that Herman calls Improbable a venture builder, so it has lots of individual companies sort of within itself, and those can work on individual problems, but also sort of work together. And that's really how it's come to blockchain. So Improbable has this company called MSquared, and that first sort of came to our notice when it was working with Yuga Labs over the other side metaverse, are still working together. So that's not a blockchain technology itself, it's just a very fast sort of infrastructure. But then working with Yuga and other partners, they realized they had to come up with their own blockchain, and that is called Somnia. The testnet is now live. We're seeing transactions per second of over 1 million. They're very fast and very cheap. And so we talk about sort of a bit about Improbable's sort of background and why it has got very good at building these hard problems, why it's so tenacious at trying to solve these problems, has a lot of capital still. It says it's going to be spending $250 million to promote the Somnia blockchain over the next 5 years. So really sort of bullish stuff from Herman. He's a very outspoken figure, so we get into some of the interesting opinions around where blockchain gaming has gone wrong at the moment, and token alignment and all this sort of good stuff. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. But on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Very pleased I've got Herman from Improbable. How's it going, Herman?
Good. How are you? It's a great day.
I'm good. We've got. Sometimes I have like a whole list of sort of questions for the podcast. This one, as we've just discussed, I've got three very simple nouns. So we're going to start with Improbable. So Improbable, I guess, is known in the games industry. Been going for like 10 years now, but probably in blockchain not so much. But that's your starting point. That was sort of your where the conversation is going to lead from. So let's get a bit about sort of Improbable and you starting it off and that sort of genesis story.
So Improbable really had a master vision from the time when we started as a whole bunch of computer scientists out of Cambridge to build the infrastructure for virtual worlds and for what we think of as the new economy, the future economy. And I talk a lot about this in my book, Virtual Society, but I think that new economy is about a couple of things. It's about unbelievable experiences that we all value. So whether that be, going beyond games into massive battles, or being able to live in, living autonomous worlds, or being able to interact with people that, you might never get to meet in the real world, but you can engage with in an amazing sense in virtual reality. That experience is one big part. And boy, has it been tough to build the technology to support that. But, now we're at the point where, I think that's in a fairly established place. The second part really are the tools, so that anyone can build these experiences and so that they can be accessible to people, to companies and to organizations that maybe might never have considered the ability to build a virtual world. It is really complicated to build, operate, and run a complex online game. And I think we've hopefully made that a lot easier with some of the companies and products that we've built. And I think the third is really around the economy. And that's what took us to blockchain. We had been waiting for somebody else to solve this problem. And as we'll talk about later, perhaps, I think we realized no one is. And so we had to. But, for these worlds to really be, to come to life, like almost like an organic thing, like a tree, they need roots that extend into the real economy and extend into our culture in order to feed these worlds and to imbue them with meaning. And that means having the infrastructure for people to own things and for those things to be able to transfer easily, between worlds, which I think is a big part of what we've built around MSquared.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So I think Improbable started sort of 2016, 2015, 2016 was when you started out. And from very much the outsider looking in, it was very much like, you very smart guys, as you say, computer scientists, coming up with all the latest new stuff, and metaverse wasn't really quite a thing then, but there was, obviously been sort of mentioned, as you say, in culture, and really when you came to Improbable, doing, I think, again from the outside looking in, very much focused on game tech. As you say, the process was quite hard. Was that hard? I mean, obviously hard from a tech point of view, I suppose, but harder more from a culture point of view, and harder from the business side of getting it to be.
Oh no, I completely. It was really tough to break into the games industry. And I think we finally found a lot of success with the Multiplayer guys, which was a company originally we acquired, but then grew to 10x their revenue, and then sold actually at the end of last year, which turned into the best outsourcer for multiplayer and online game help kind of in the Western games industry. We worked on Call of Duty, we worked on Grand Theft Auto, we worked on loads of titles, and even built the multiplayer mode for Fall Guys. And in doing all of that, we gained a tremendous amount of experience, but also respect within the games industry that I think fed to the second version of our core technology and the creation of MSquared, pretty profoundly, moving on from where we were with Spatial OS. I think probably the most interesting thing about Improbable, beyond the deep technology venture builder that we've become, is the tenacity with which we've pursued the mission, right? A lot of people would give up if it didn't work out immediately or if the problem was really hard. I think we've specialized in doing things that everybody tells us we can't do, and then doing them in a really profound way. Not many people know this, for example, but myself and my co-founders are actually sanctioned by the nation of Russia. We're not allowed to travel to Russia or Iran or South Korea or North Korea or any of these places. Not that we want to go to North Korea, but it's because we, along the way on the journey with our technology, we applied that tech to defense work. And we actually sold our defense business last year, but in doing that, we were able to attack yet another very hard problem that I think a lot of people, maybe, and it got involved in the Ukraine war, and that was, we're very proud of that. But equally, it kind of goes to show the character of the company. Like, we tend to go after things everyone tells us we can't do, which is why we're now building a blockchain, right? Because that's the thing everyone really doesn't want you to do. Yeah.
But it's a good sort of point there. I mean, you sort of mentioned in quite quick succession, you've had sort of companies doing multiplayer stuff for games and defense, and they've been sort of part of. You sort of had a bit of a roll up because you raised quite a lot of money, and then you sort of refocused your focus. But it's sort of interesting, I guess, with a lot of tech companies, the problem is not necessarily the tech doesn't work or the tech takes a long time to build. It's just being you as sort of founders, your vision is too far ahead of where the market currently is, and you can loads of companies died just for being too early.
No, completely, or not understanding the commercial potential of where they were. I mean, one of the things we've brutally focused on with MSquared, which is our metaverse business, and the manifestation of in many ways why we originally started Improbable for the experience side, is making the cost of operations so low and the ease of use so high for us in terms of platform. Like, we've done, probably most people don't know this, we've done over 100 public events in the last year, from Major League Baseball matches to K-pop album launch parties to Yuga Labs events. And we've done this to just like perfect the capability and be able to do, more and more and more of this stuff. Like on Saturday, depending on when this goes out, in a week or so, we're going to be trying to break the world record for the most number of people in a first-person shooter, in a single space, with over 1,500 people. It's the tech works, but it's more getting enough people to show up to that event. So I think, we missed it by 100 last time. So I think hopefully this time we'll get there. But yeah, you're right. Commercialization and timing are very challenging, which is why, as we've evolved into a deep tech venture builder, and why we've become a venture builder is realizing that each piece we build can be valuable in its own right, and also that some of the skills and technology we've developed super useful to other companies that we might engage with and help them to grow. Doing that, a lot of that is actually commercial timing. A lot of what we've brought to the companies we work with is this idea of how to commercialize the capability that they've created.
Mm-hmm. You just mentioned their venture builder. I mean, can you unpick a bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, so Improbable is a company of companies. We take each of the things that we invent or the people that we engage with and want to build companies with, and we turn those into individual things. So MSquared, run by Rob Whitehead, my co-founder, is actually a business with its own cap table, its own board, that is a subsidiary of Improbable. And there are many other ventures that we've built as well, including things like Chitta, which is our Twitch play, allowing people to interact directly in Twitch chat with their audiences, which is really awesome. And then, other work that we've built. For example, we have Emporium, which is collaborating directly with companies to build metaverse experiences for them. Why we do it this way is because when businesses try to compound everything together, you end up creating a very unfocused machine that isn't capable of being effective at any one thing. Separating things into individual businesses both means we can take our large cash pile and potentially, engage with external parties to work on cool ideas that we think matter, but it also means that each thing we do tends to be very focused and can either succeed or fail. And I think what's been great about our model is we're also happy to accept when things don't work and to be able to move away from them. And that's meant that as we've worked toward building a blockchain with Somnia and the Virtual Society Foundation, that's been able to be really focused. We don't need the Somnia blockchain to be deeply integrated if it doesn't make sense to be with our other ventures. It has to stand on its own two legs. And that has been a very effective discipline for us.
Good. So you've mentioned so the second noun on my list was MSquared, and I guess that's where us in the blockchain space started to sort of prick up our ears, because that was when you were doing sort of announcing you're doing stuff with Yuga, which, as you mentioned, you're sort of still doing now. So explain what MSquared is and how
MSquared is a software platform for building a virtual world. You pay a little bit of money every month, and you can build and operate a large scale, complex virtual world, just like Yuga Labs' other side. So that's one like critical part of what it does. It can handle almost 30,000 people in a single space interacting together. It allows for streaming. It allows for audio, crowd audio in the same spot, so everyone can speak and talk and interact together. You can completely customize a game world with the full power of the Unreal Engine if you wish, and have that work with thousands of people. It handles 20 billion messages a second on the back end, and it's so cheap and low cost that an indie studio could do this. And for those of you that have been following Improbable for a long time, this is what we wanted to build with Spatial OS like 12 years ago, but it took that long to get to a place where this works as effectively as it does. It's growing pretty quickly, and we look at that as like probably one of the most important businesses that we are enabling.
Mm-hmm. And when you were saying that's when you started the bit Improbable, that sort of MSquared where you want to end up. How much of that is, you have the vision, but how much is sort of the refining on the tech side? Obviously, it's not just your tech. You have to rely on the infrastructure that third parties are providing to you, and
we had to invent our own rendering engine to handle that many different looking characters on screen. We had to invent a cross-world format so that people could bring assets from one world to the other. We had to invent a bandwidth compression technology. We had to invent a backend that could handle that level of scale. It took us a long, long time to do that, and many false starts in terms of getting this to a production-ready state. And I think, why we have such a massive advantage. Of people have asked, like, why has no one else been able to build that level of scale? Why can't you do it in Fortnite? Why can't you do it in these places? Because we've done nothing but focus on this problem for an extended period. Yeah. So, as now, I think a lot of NFT collections and game communities need to differentiate what they're providing and provide social spaces and interaction. Now MSquared is just perfectly positioned to do that. And on top of MSquared, we've also built a protocol, which is, I think we haven't talked very publicly about this, but it's in the manifesto that we released and beyond. But it's really a way for worlds on chain to have shared economies and shared asset networks that can move between each other. A lot of people talked about, when will there be Bored Apes moving into another world. Well, we did that last year with Major League Baseball allowing apes to come into those worlds, and those assets, crucially, being part of different universes.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So I guess from as we already discussed, there's a sort of a tech side of things, which is difficult, and you have to everything has to sort of work sort of properly for the whole thing to work. But then there's sort of the business aspect, and I guess. You're saying sort of, with MSquared, sort of indie companies could use that now, but I guess most indie companies are not going to need to have 30,000 people in the same sort of space. So I guess there's that sort of issue. Is you're saying come and use this, but there's not that many games that would want to have that could even have 30,000 people in a concurrent space because they just don't have that amount of users. So that
yeah, I guess. But I think the challenge people have is it's hard to even get 100. So what we've done is we've just taken away that scale problem completely. Okay. We've made it really easy to build and operate a world of arbitrary scale, is the way I would look at it. When you're designing or thinking about your game or world or experience, you just don't have to think about that, right? And I think for a lot of concepts, a lot of ideas, social communities coming together, worlds that you can interact with, also especially for like celebrity interactions, some of the biggest areas of growth for us are sports and music, where actually if you're a musician or a sports star wanting to hang out with your fans, you can't shard yourself, right? So a lot of the value that people have often talked about with the metaverse just doesn't work. I mean, if you saw with things like VR-based music experiences and beyond, it didn't work because you were kind of dancing by yourself with 5 people around you, right? With what we've built now, suddenly you can have that crowd, you can have that experience. And I think one thing we've always found is betting on the need for human beings to feel relatedness to one another, betting on the need for your design, your experience, your world, to have an unbounded ability to bring people together is always a good bet to make. And I think even in the games industry now, where for those of you that have been following, it's been a really rough time, right? 10,000 layoffs this year, last year, the year before. The games industry desperately needs differentiated content now. When we first started Improbable, it didn't. Now it really does. And so, like, if all you're going to do is come out with yet another, arena shooter or yet another experience that looks just like everything else, your game's going to get crushed. And so suddenly it's actually very important to have differentiation. I'd also say it's not just about people anymore. It's about AI too. So the platform's really built from the get-go with the idea that you're going to have thousands of NPCs interacting potentially as well, which kind of changes a lot of what people want to build.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Okay, so the third noun is Somnia, which is your blockchain part, or it's a separate. I guess it's a separate company as well, isn't it? But very very much linked to MSquared, I think. So can you talk a bit about why? Because people in the traditional game space, blockchain's always still maybe a bit of a sort of dirty word to them, or certainly maybe some of them think, oh, this could be interesting in a few years' time. But you guys seem to have gone. As you say, no one needs any more block space. No one says to go and design another blockchain, and there you are with your own blockchain and block space. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is, sure, there's block space available, but I mean, I'd like sub-second latency, and I'd like more than 5 transactions a second.
Yeah.
That would be, or 10 or whatever the number is. I think the reality is that if you want to build a serious business on top of crypto, you still really can't. If you want to trade meme coins or you want to launch an NFT collection, you're spoken for. But if you want to build an on-chain world that everyone can extend, the mess, particularly on the EVM, is that the reason we came to this is we wanted to put much more of our worlds on chain. And we found that the cost of doing so would be so astronomical, we may as well go and basically build our own internet service provider to do it at that level. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. And what we discovered was the reason for that is there's no incentive within the crypto space where people are pure crypto companies selling block space. They get obsessed with that token price. And all they're really doing is optimizing for that. So you see this problem with Ethereum right now where, there's endless L2s that are providing scale. But then they're horribly broken, and it's very difficult to move an asset from one to the other. And the whole thing is just a mess, and no user, no real company is going to operate in that way. So over the last 2 years, we worked with Andreessen Horowitz and others, and we've been optimizing. And we've now reached the point where we have testnet this week, and we'll be able to handle 1 million transactions a second, 1 million TPS, 50,000 Uniswaps a second in one of the experiments that we did, which shows you how we can handle non-parallel transactions, sub-second latency, validator nodes that are less intense than Solana. So you can use consumer hardware here, and an ability to be completely EVM compatible. So, we think this is going to be profoundly valuable to games companies and other organizations that don't want to worry about, gas fees or block price and want to be in a place where this stuff is just ridiculously straightforward to use. And, do we wish we didn't want to do this? We have enough going on. But the fact that nobody did after 10 years of waiting is what's pushed us to the point where we just need to move forward and make this happen. And it's not just a blockchain. It's also a governance unit and a way of operating where you have Improbable and an organization that we've supported in the Virtual Society Foundation as a counterparty. So if you're a serious business now looking to build on top, here's a multi-billion-dollar company that's actively able to to support this, and also there's someone to sue if things go wrong, right? There's an opportunity to really engage.
So you're not going to optimize for token price then?
I mean, honestly, no, because we don't need the money. I mean, that's the reality. We're investing significant cash every year. I mean, it's public record that we have almost $250 million in cash. We're in a position where our focus is building the best infrastructure and creating the best environment for developers. It'd be great to have a token price that actually incentivized people to come in, to get involved in the community and to grant out. And that's what we're hoping the foundation that's independent of us, does. Yeah. But ultimately, no, we're not, because, that's not what we're here to do. The other thing you mentioned earlier is we've been doing this for like 12 years, right? Yeah. A lot of the people who enter the blockchain space to quote unquote change the world have been doing it for 6 months. They cash out and they run away. And I think hopefully we've developed enough trust in the community that there's a level of tenaciousness to what we do. We're not going to do something and then run away from it 6 months later.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess, as you say, there is an interesting, I guess you get sort of waves of tech people coming into crypto or blockchain, depending on, over the last, 15 years during different times. And I guess there's always a push to have more sort of performant, hot, networks, which is always sort of seems a little bit funny at the time because we're not really like filling up what we've got at the moment. But I guess from people will always want faster, and maybe the issue is you're not filling it up because it's not fast enough. Maybe there is some sort of critical point where it needs to be so fast that it doesn't, the speed doesn't really matter anymore.
I think it's like dial-up and broadband, right?
Yeah.
We weren't doing stuff with dial-up that we could do with broadband, but you kind of need things to be really at a point where you're not thinking about that capacity or that challenge. I mean, to be clear, right now, when we talk about on-chain games, nothing's on-chain. Right, there's a token, but the world state isn't on chain. An NFT is just like a pointer to an image.
There are a few fully on chain games.
What's an example in your mind of a fully on chain game? I'd love to challenge you on that.
Well, I actually advise one called Soccerverse. So, but you won't have heard of that. But I mean, there's Pirate Nation. Pirate Nation, I guess, is the big one from Proof of Play because they're doing an infrastructure play as well. So
yeah, Pirate Nation is a great example. Their infrastructure costs are absolutely astronomical because of the problem of performance. If you take an example of something like Pirate Nation, if it was on Somnia, they would save literally millions of dollars just because the gas fees were lower and just because they have an opportunity to go and build that. And that's a great example for me where Pirate Nation shouldn't have to spend that kind of money. They shouldn't have to spend the sort of money you would spend to run a complex 3D MMORPG just to put effectively a game that is, relatively simplistic on state on chain. So people have, I think, made this happen despite the enormous challenges of doing this, right? And I want to be in a place where there's not even a thought process around putting stuff on chain. And then the crucial thing is also shared state and context. So a lot of the point of blockchain is the idea that I can build off of your work and add value to it. How am I going to do that if your state is on your own app chain and my state's on my own app chain? At this point, they're just databases, right? It's not a blockchain anymore. It's a series of gated communities, which is part of the problem. So I think what we're aiming to do is not just handle performance, but also bring everything together to some extent. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a long, slow, grinding process. And I think what we've shown in the past and what we hope to show again is we can outlast a lot of these problems. Like we're planning a 5-year investment profile for this just to get started.
I mean, it is sort of interesting because over the last year, a lot of, well, pretty much every blockchain game worth its salt was basically gone through a sort of infrastructure decision tree and come off of what it was on and come onto something else, because there's been all these L2, L3s, Arbitrum and Optimism, all that sort of stuff. So it's interesting that everyone has sort of has made their decisions for the next sort of couple of years. So it may take a few years for them to have to go through that decision again, because once you've migrated everyone over, certainly all your users have all migrated all their NFTs over, they don't want to be doing that. Every 6 months.
I don't personally think our focus is going to be trying to get the stuff that's already on chain to come onto Somnia. I think our focus is, as always, new businesses, new opportunities. If I think of some of the people we're speaking to about this, they're some of the largest consumer brands on earth, and they're not currently selling NFT collections. They're thinking about wholly new experiences on chain. And of course, every world being built on MSquared, which wants to put something on chain, we're going to make it really attractive to do that as well. So, for me, it's about the new stuff. It's about the stuff, honestly, I was promised when I was told blockchain would be a thing. You can mod my game, you can build this experiences on top, and none of that is possible today. So, I think the very insular community focused on, upping NFT value, etc. No, I don't particularly think there's a lot of value in servicing that. But I think what we're seeing is that's very much become PvP. Folks giving out massive grants to try to move, onto their block space, when all that block space is fundamentally the same. That's the other thing I would say. With the performance we've reached, again, to put that in perspective, 1 million DPS at sub-second finality, you could take the entirety of every single transaction currently happening on blockchain, move it onto this, and still have room left over.
So do you think, one of the big sort of debates at the moment is, and I think the debate has sort of been won maybe you'd see in the small sort of local sort of decision-making tree, that everyone's like, every game needs its own blockchain, because we can't, if we're on the same blockchain as someone else and that they congest us, and so everyone sort of moved on to their own infrastructure. Do you sort of, is the point of something like Somnia, doesn't really matter, you can throw whatever, you don't need to go through all these.
Exactly. And that's essentially economically very important, because games right now struggle enormously with two problems. The cost of user acquisition, which is almost $30-40 a user, whether you're a blockchain game or not, and also the massive cost of developing new experiences. Unless you share context and share space, you're never going to take advantage of the advantages of blockchain, which allow you to reduce your user acquisition costs, like airdropping value to popular players of another game, or even be in a place where you can create cross-chain value. And if you can't do that, you're just making games with tokens. And making games with tokens is no better than just building. All that means is your game isn't going to be on Steam, but you have no advantages, beyond that. I think the real reason people are doing that is because they want to pump a token, and they know that an infrastructure token is more valuable than a non-infrastructure token. And I think the market will only bear a certain number more of those grifts before there's a real opportunity to kind of come to Jesus and fix this up. So we're very much playing for the long term.
But I think if you've been studying tokens sort of launching over the last, or token prices over the last even 2 months, the game stuff is really down. The only one that's interesting, there was one launched last week, which is B3, which is sort of into sort of the same sort of playing field as you guys, but obviously it's come out of base, and base doesn't have its own tokens. That one's done quite well, but I think for optimizing token price reasons rather than necessarily it's got a lot of stuff.
I couldn't care less what our token price is. I have to be honest. That isn't at all my focus. It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't. That's not how we make money. We're going to succeed based upon the amount of transactions, traffic, and users on chain. So all I care about are the number of developers and the number of users. To the extent that token price in any way influences that, I care. But that's it. It truly does not matter. I don't know when we got into this habit as an industry that the roads and the power plants should be generating value through the speculative, value of their energy and their roads. This is what's wrong with crypto. And so, I couldn't care less about it. It isn't something we think about on a daily basis. We do worry about how to make it really easy for developers to come on chain. We do worry about expanding the pool of creatives that can come onto the blockchain. And a lot of what I'm trying to do with our venture builder is actually apply, millions of dollars of investment capital into compelling businesses that we think might benefit from being on chain. I should say as well, EVM compatible as well. It's very easy to migrate back and forth. So fighting for that is a losing battle.
So it's sort of your view. Sort of one of the issues is sort of the current blockchain games sort of community is so focused on this sort of weird sort of business model that it's come up with, and that doesn't appeal to the sort of bigger brands who, or even the traditional games companies, because they just look at this sort of weird little mess of a few thousand people playing and juggling tokens. And that's the reason the thing hasn't gone mainstream, because not only is the tech not there, but equally the sort of people it's attracting are just not interesting to the EAs and Take-Twos.
Yeah, but also, again, I can't stress enough how the tech not being there is an issue. Like, if you couldn't put Call of Duty's economy on chain, it would just blow up every blockchain you touched. I think we keep hand-waving over that as an industry because we've been fed this idea that it can't be optimized further. It's shocking to me the level of optimization on the EVM that's been possible. I mean, yeah, sure, we had to build our own bytecode compiler. We had to, come up with really complex ways of doing hardware parallelization, invent our own database. But, we've got experience doing this before. I'm just surprised that, you're right, it is kind of like the Hunger Games. There's a lot of people fighting over a very, very small amount of value. And that's because they're really in it for their own personal exits and their own personal opportunities to create value. And I can't blame them, right? If that's your first venture, and if you can be an anonymous person online and exit like $10-20 million of cash personally, more power to you, right? But I think ultimately, that isn't how we're going to make a multi-$100 billion industry, which is what crypto gaming should be, particularly in a world where the EAs are actually down in terms of revenue and stock price. So are Ubisoft, so are Activision, post-acquisition, not in the best shape. And they're down because gamers are bored of the same crap. I mean, we want new experiences. We want an opportunity to really invest in these worlds. And I think if your choices are, come play a play-to-earn game that, let's face it, isn't a very good game, and, is mostly being played by like a small number of Southeast Asian folks who are trying to earn an income from it, or come play Call of Duty 93, that's a very sorry state for us to be in as an industry. So, we absolutely would love to be, responsible for just a little bit of change in that equation. And I think if we can attract the right developers and give them support beyond money, with our venture builder model, maybe we'll be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. You sort of touched on sort of AI, and I guess that's, one of the big, the last couple of years, and one of the big sort of themes. And I guess it's been the last sort of couple of months for crypto, in blockchain gaming even, we've started to see very very early signs of sort of AI agents, and obviously the most just chatbots at the moment with tokens attached. So a bit of optimizing for your own token there. But how big a deal do you think that is in terms of sort of presetting some of these environments where there's not going to be like tons of users for the first period of time, but you might want to turn up and have something interesting going on. So I mean, are we leaning too much into this sort of AI agents are going to, some people are saying, it's the sort of collapse of lawyers and all these, jobs that have previously been sort of protected from sort of low cost sort of competition. Do you think that sort of stuff is coming in?
I do. Look, we use AI in everything we do at this point, from changing how developers operate to even building our technology. We built MML in JavaScript, and what's been powerful with that is AI is much better at using JavaScript than it is at using Unreal or other things. So a lot of our tools, we're now thinking, okay, what tools are best for AI? AI are almost the developer now in the way we operate and think.
Really?
Even in terms of how our rendering algorithms work, they are very focused on allowing for UGC, so made assets that are uploaded on the fly. That's extremely valuable from a generative AI perspective. And like our sense is almost all of the labor that goes into game development will be automated, and will be automated in 36 months is my view.
Right.
I think that fast, yeah. And I think you will have small teams that are really productive, that are necessary to correct and manage work. But in my own coding, I pretty much entirely use Cursor, and everything is vibes based. I mean, again, I don't ship production code, but still, it's kind of extraordinary how productive you can be. In terms of why this matters from a blockchain perspective, look, of those million transactions a second, how many are going to be generated by an AI? Probably a large number. And if we're going to be in a world where AI agents are doing commerce, promoting a game, building a game, they're not going to have bank accounts, right? They're going to end up having wallets. And so we've thought, some people ask us often about the capacity, are you building capacity that is necessary for the current kind of human developer community? And we're like, sort of, but it's definitely necessary for an AI agent community. And I think this is where, in today's world, you kind of have to be thinking about infrastructure for two communities.
Yeah.
A really good question. Yeah.
No, it is sort of, being technical but not being a sort of coder or anything. It is sort of, the more you sort of look at this stuff, it's a more bizarre that obviously some very clever stuff has gone in the background, but basically this is just a whole bunch of computers doing pattern recognition on a whole bunch of old data. I mean, it just seems phenomenal how it actually works.
Kind of nuts. I mean, when you think about it, look, at the end of the day, what's in here? Some neurons that look at, they sum the input energy of axons and dendrites, and then they produce a signal, right? It's kind
Yeah.
of wild that a primitive that simple can lead to the emergent complexity of what we think of as our own minds and our own capabilities, right? And I think this machine intelligence it's a bit of a Rorschach test for the people looking at it.
Yeah.
I think there are people both in the creative fields and the technical fields that really don't want this to work as well as it's working. They want to believe there's something special, some other trick, some other component. And I think the reality is that, we may be a lot simpler than we think we are. In the context of where we are. Yeah, but of course there's hallucinations, there's errors. Yes, these are not objective-driven systems, they're generative systems, but functionally they can pretty much do most labor that you'd want to be done, right? People often ask, like, can they replace every human job? I don't even think most humans are spending 90% of their brain power on their job, right? I mean, it's like, you're kind of like, you're 10%, 15% a lot of the time. And, I think these systems can easily replace that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's even, going way off track, it's even the fact that Twitter can lose 75% of its staff and doesn't seem to work any less well than before. I mean, that's nothing to do with Gen AI. That's just, so it's interesting, obviously you've written sort of books about this sort of stuff, but it is interesting that for 100 years people have predicted we're going to get more leisure. We do have more leisure. We just spend it on TikTok. I suppose that's not so great. But with the stuff like AI agents, you could really see that sort of vision that people had, in the 20s and 30s about working.
And it's going to sound crazy, but it's going to make online games into a critical industry for human health. For human health, right? Because fulfillment is the lifeblood of why we get up in the morning and what we do. If you take away the fulfillment people get from their jobs, which is going to happen, it is an inevitability. Where's that fulfillment going to come from, right? And actually having rich, meaningful worlds which we can explore, which we can engage in, which we can see and create stories in. It's so important for us to have purpose, right? I mean, for me personally, I think virtual worlds are more exciting than the real world. And I was looking at some stats yesterday. We were talking to a business that's working in the space for our venture builder model, that's working in the space of AI companions for relationships. Really interesting space. I was shocked to see the stats. It's like, some very not insignificant percentage of like all US adults would be willing to have a relationship with an AI. And that's that's I think the other side of this equation. If it's good enough to marry, it's probably good enough to replace your job, right?
Yeah. No, and I've seen some of those same stats, and I think it's we're obviously of a certain generation, but the younger generation just see this stuff as sort of seamless. I mean, if they have that, we can argue.
It's like online dating, right? I remember when I was growing up, online dating was like the weirdest thing ever. If you were involved in online dating, you was something wrong with you. Now, if you try to not online date, there's something wrong with you, right? And I think, perhaps AI companions will go down a similar trajectory.
Yeah. I mean, given your sort of history of running these sort of tech companies for decades and finding it is harder. Are we sort of like getting a bit high on our own Kool-Aid here, and we can see where it's going to come, but maybe even your 36 months of automated sort of coding is, wish fulfillment really. And
I'm basing that on my own use of these products. Right? Like I wanted to make a little experiment on the weekend, which was I was getting tired of all the bad news. I think a lot of people are. So I thought, what would be great? It'd be great to extract a bunch of news articles off Reddit and then systematically convert them while making the facts the same into the most positive version they could possibly be, right? And, I call this better news. And I was able to build it in about 2 prompts on Cursor. The entire thing. The entire thing working. I mean, the hardest part was getting some Reddit credentials to make it work. And it worked reasonably well. And then I kept adding features to it by engaging with Cursor. I mean, that's something that, normally would have taken me a weekend to think through how to build, how to do. I'm not a great coder, but still, it was shocking that was so fast. So again, a question of whether something, I think it's an academic question as to whether something replaces 100% of the work to do a task or 80% of the work to do a task. It's going to be incredibly disruptive regardless. And some industries like translators, mid-level translators, I mean, that business is just dead now. Copywriting, that business is just dead now, right? I mean, you just don't need a lot of those people because AI does the job so much. Concept art, it's very tough now to get a role as a concept artist in the industry, because frankly, that's not art that's front of house. It's there for representing the vibes of the world, and you can do it pretty easily with AI now.
Okay, let's try and, as we come to here, let's try and draw it back from our mad fantasies. So with Somnia, where are you at the moment? What things should we be looking at for? What's on the sort of roadmap for 2025?
Testnet in days,
Really?
and we will be. I can't say when mainnet is, but we will beat to market every single alt EVM chain to mainnet. And we are not just launching the chain and the token with the Virtual Society Foundation. We're also going to be investing in companies on Somnia as well. And we're going to be bringing a large part of the capital at Improbable's disposal to fully build out that ecosystem. And we're really interested, especially in game developers, that I think want to finally, maybe were anti-crypto, but have reached a stage where they've now had, seen a friend of mine in a big publisher was like, him and his friends actually had a wake for the death of the conventional games industry. I was like, wow, that's extreme. But I think they're now finally coming around to the idea that maybe they need to do new things. So I think bringing great non-crypto talent into crypto is the goal of Somnia.
Okay.
We don't want to fight with the other piranhas for exactly the same 5 customers. We would rather do new things.
Mm-hmm. But if there are some sort of existing teams who sort of messed around with this stuff and obviously understand, the problems that there are now, being EVM compatible, how quickly can they get up and running?
It's EVM compatible, so literally you can change one line, the endpoint, and it's completely EVM compatible. There's literally indistinguishable from Ethereum from that perspective.
Okay.
So if you're on the EVM, literally press a button and we will just reduce your gas fees. Like if Pirate Nation wanted to migrate tomorrow, they could. I mean, I don't know if they'd want to get off their own infrastructure for the sake of the token price, but if all they wanted to do is reduce their infrastructure cost by millions of dollars, we would do that.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, good. We will wait and see the flood of content over.
Yeah. I think it'll take time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that was a really good introduction, Herman. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
We'll have to come back at some point in the future and see how fast the vision is materializing, or whether we were too optimistic.
Let's do it.
Cool.
No, it was good fun. Really good fun.
And thanks to you guys for watching, listening the podcast, however you are consuming. Every episode we are talking to people who are optimistically building out this new world of playing games and interacting and having relationships with AI and agents and all this sort of stuff. It's really, I think 2025 is really shaping up to be quite a visionary year. So do subscribe, don't miss out, and we'll see you next time.